Good afternoon and welcome to a first ever Sunday edition of Lincoln City's pre-match show Matchday Live. The Imps, of course, looking to go 6 points clear the top of the League One table. So much to bring you this afternoon, including the team news, of course, in around about half an hour's time. And having had two brilliant guests on Tuesday night, we've got another two great guests lined up for you this evening as well. Chief Executive Officer Liam Scully will be joining us later on in the show, and Brennan Johnson's dad as well, David. We're delighted to speak to him later on in the show. Today's topic of choice, of course, with it being Valentine's Day, is which footballer made you fall in love with football? Nice and easy one for you, no doubt. Do get your questions and comments in, and I'll do my best to read them out throughout the show. Matchday Live's very own Casanova joins us as well. Gary Hutchinson is here. Gary, nice to see you.
I wouldn't say Casanova, Sam, but it's nice to see you too, mate.
Let's have a look back at the game the other night then, Gary, because another point on the board and carrying on that brilliant away defensive record as well.
Yeah, it was a challenging game, challenging conditions. I think when you go to any team that are aspiring to automatic promotion, you expect to come under pressure at times as well. I thought our rearguard action was very, very strong. We've got such a well-rounded squad. And when we did break, we actually looked capable of scoring as well. Now, I know Hull are not on a great run, and when sandwiched between two defeats, the draw might not look on paper as impressive as it actually was. I think this was a big moment for Lincoln City in our promotion push. Yeah,
at times like this, Gary, it's about staying solid, isn't it? It's about getting the job done. You know, if you can't win, don't lose it. It's exactly what we did. And you know, ultimately it prevented Hull from getting 2 extra points on us.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a difference between going out not to get beat and going out not being able to win and not getting beat. And I think we don't go out and defend. We don't go and put loads of men behind the ball, but we are always very good at the back. We're always very organised. It's the first Lincoln City team that I don't ever really think are going to concede. And when we do concede a goal, it always comes as a little bit of a shock to me. And Lincoln City fans of a certain age will know that's ridiculous. We used to concede every game. It was a matter of how many. But that's just a testament to, you know, the patterns. It's a testament to the movement off the ball of the defenders and the fact that we've got players that will put their body on the line as well. We saw some excellent blocks at the back from Adam Jackson, Joe Walsh, putting their bodies on the line. And, you know, we're just so committed all over the field.
Yeah, it came into it a bit in the second half, didn't they, Hull?
Yes, they did. You expect them to when they're at home. They had a few decent chances. I mean, look, it was a game that I felt ebbed and flowed quite well, actually. I mean, they started very well. We then had a kind of a 10, 15-minute spell. Then they came back into it at the end of the half. It was swung like a pendulum. And then in the final 10 minutes, it could have been anybody's game, you know, and on a pitch like that, one missed kick, one bobbly ball, can cause you a lot of problems. So we had to stay on it for 90 minutes. I would imagine those games are very mentally demanding on the players.
Michael Appleton made 2 big substitutions on the hour mark, Gary. Tell us a little bit about them. He obviously brought Regan Poole on and brought Cohen Bramall on into proceedings as well. How did they fare? And give us an insight into what you think the decision-making behind that, what the reason was.
Yeah, first of all, I think it was almost inevitable that we were going to see those 2 players sooner rather than later. And the fullback areas, we've kind of had settled play from Ioma and Eden. But I think that when we signed these 2 boys, it was an intention to get them into the side as soon as possible. When you're playing Saturday, Tuesday, they don't have 2 months' grace to kind of slide in nice and slowly. So they were always going to get a game. Also, I think that schedule is punishing, and I think it's particularly punishing on players who are expected to be behind the ball when we're defending and getting ahead of the ball when we're attacking. And the way that we play, you know, there's a lot of demand, a lot of physical demand placed on the fullbacks. So to have fresh legs coming on, not just against Hull, but you know, with Wednesday's game in mind, and then next Wednesday, Tuesday, and so on is important. I think when they came on, they both did very well. I do wonder if there was an element, not of burnout, but maybe just of tiredness in Ioma and Eden's legs. We didn't see them getting balls into the box with the same sort of regularity on Tuesday night as we've been used to. That might be because of where we were and the style of play from the opposition. But both Bramall and Regan Poole both got forward. They both put a ball into the box. I think Regan Poole's was the only cross of ours that actually connected in the full 90 minutes. So I think they both settled quite quickly. I think they both looked more than competent, and I fully expect them to see them play in a more prominent role over the coming weeks, without a doubt.
Yeah, that was the impact of Cohen Bramall and Regan Poole. Another man that's had quite the impact in terms of Lincoln City's defensive record so far this season is Joe Walsh. Man of the match the other night, Gary. What an impact he's having. He is having quite the season, isn't he?
He is. To some people, I think it's almost like he came from nowhere because he arrived injured at the club, where he arrived and picked up an injury early doors. And it was almost like he was the forgotten man for the first couple of weeks. Adam Jackson got off the mark with a goal. There was clean sheets. Lewis Monsma stole the headlines. Then Joe Walsh, I think he slipped in against Fleetwood, did the uncomplicated things with relative ease. But as the demands have become more increasing on our defence, as we've come under pressure, I think you've seen more and more of Joe Walsh and what he's capable of. You know, he puts his body on the line an awful lot. Very good distribution. He's very comfortable carrying the ball out. And for me, he's our first choice centre-back, partnered by either Monsma or Jackson at the moment.
Since then, of course, there's been some League One fixtures that have taken place yesterday, Gary. Defeats for Hull, Charlton as well, and Doncaster, who lost quite convincingly away at Sunderland, having missed 2 penalties themselves. Surprise you, any of those? Obviously, I mean, we'll start with the Charlton one. They can't seem to really put a run together, can they?
They can't. No, brilliant set of results, wasn't it, Sam? Made my Saturday. I think with Charlton, there's some cohesion issues there, and there was lots of blame in the post-match about the referee, about Steve Evans on the touchline, lots of kind of mudslinging. And for me, Charlton are on the fringe of the playoff race. I think there's five teams perhaps who are vying for the automatic promotion spots, and then Charlton are the next in line in terms of the playoffs. They've had an awful lot of players come and go over the course of the season, and I don't think that upheaval is conducive to bringing in a kind of a settled side and a steady approach. So it's no surprise to me that they're inconsistent.
And Hull themselves losing yesterday, losing to Burton as well away from home before they played the Imps. I talk about not being able to put a run together in terms of Charlton's perspective, but it's almost the same case for Hull as well.
Yeah, it is absolutely. On paper, those games perhaps look like games that Hull City should win, and obviously if you're in an automatic promotion spot, you expect to pick up those points. But look, Burton Albion are a team who have made an awful lot of changes over the winter period for the better, and I personally think that they will stay up. I think they're a side that are going in the right direction. MK Dons are in that little collection of teams in the middle of the pack, along with Oxford and along with Plymouth, who are putting together some very good performances and very good results. So in actual fact, it's been a tricky week for Hull. There've been 3 tricky games when you throw us in there as well. And again, I wasn't hugely surprised that they didn't take all 3 points. I probably expected a draw, but even so, it's not a massive surprise.
Today's topic in question, if you're just joining us on this evening's Matchday Live, is which footballer made you fall in love with the game? Stuart Wells says Ronaldinho is the player that made me love football. That man could do anything and made the game an art. He always had a smile on his face as well. Do let us know which player, whether it's a Lincoln City player, whether it's a player outside of the Imps that made you fall in love with the game, and I'll read them out throughout the course of the show. I think one player who's making a lot of people fall in love with this season is Brennan Johnson, and delighted to say that Brennan's dad joins us live now as well. David, a former Manchester United player as well. David, great to have you on the show. Your player is having quite the season. Your son, I should say, is having quite the campaign.
I think he's enjoying his football. I think that the timing was good. I think they've got a young squad. The style of football, the manager, the whole staff have made him feel very welcome, and he's just slotted in quite nicely. And if you'd have told me he'd have been playing left wing, he would have probably not gone on loan. You know, he wanted to play in his strongest positions, but what Michael Appleton has done is developed him. He's a lot more mature. He's happy to play in several different roles, and I think that has been what Michael Appleton's done to all the players. I think he's made every player on the football pitch better, and I think that's a great test to him and his staff, and that's what you want out of a manager.
David, we're looking at the goals now. It's the quality of some of these finishes. I mean, he's showing the maturity of a 27, 28-year-old, you know, not necessarily a 19-year-old. Just tell us a little bit about that. Are those chats that you've had with him about, you know, his finishing and how he can improve that? Because some of the goals he's scored for us this season.
No, not at all. You know, when I played, I wouldn't have moved outside the 5-yard box. You know, I'd have just stayed in there waiting for balls to come in. He's always played with He's faced a goal, so he arrives in the box quite well. But now he's playing in a different position. I think that he's missed a few chances. You know, he could have done better in the final third. But as things going, you know, he's contributing to the team. That's the main thing.
Hi, David. Quick question from me. Obviously, Brennan's got international honours this season as well. Something that obviously you achieved with Jamaica, and I believe you played in the last ever England B game as well. How important is it for a young player's development, you think, to get away with the international squads?
Well, I think if you're not playing men's football, it's pointless. I think he's got the opportunity to play games at Lincoln, and him going away on international duty, playing with the likes of Aaron Ramsey, Gareth Bales, is very nice. But I think when the last call-up came, I think he was gutted he was going to miss a couple of games. He really wanted to play for Lincoln, but it's international football, and he really likes his time going away for Wales. And hopefully in the next couple of years, you know, he'll break into the squad and get more game time.
Wonderful. And obviously we were all really worried that he might be recalled by Nottingham Forest in the summer. From a parent's point of view, how pleased were you to see that he stayed at Lincoln and will keep playing regular football?
I honestly don't think it was ever going to happen, him getting recalled. I think Gary Brazil had really good contact with Lincoln. Chris Hughton, they need to bring in a bit more experience in those areas. They've got a massive squad. And I think that it was all about Brennan getting games. And, you know, at this minute, he's helping the team. You know, he's working very hard. And I think you would have stopped his development if he'd have gone back to Forest and just been a squad player. So I think it's, you know, it's the right choice. He was really happy that happened. And I think he's really settled now. And he's looking forward to finish the season off on a high.
David, eagle-eyed Lincoln City fans on social media noticed that after Brennan's debut goal, a certain David Beckham gave him a like on Instagram. Tell us about your time at Manchester United. And I guess the big question is, will we ever seeing David down at the LNER Stadium cheering Brennan on?
He was obviously a year older than me, and he's my boss. So I work for David. And so, you know, when Brennan signed for the company, you know, I've seen met David before, and he keeps a close eye on, you know, Brennan, how's he's doing and things like that, and drops him a message just in case he needs. It's difficult for young players at times, you know, the ups and downs, and David's always there, obviously, if he wants to talk to him. He's out in Miami now, and I'm sure when he comes back, if the opportunity arises to come watch Brennan, he'll definitely come.
He seems to have the right attitude as well, Brennan. I mean, I've read some interviews that you've done over the years, David, talking about how important attitude is, especially from a young player's perspective. And Brennan is so young, but he just wants to play football, but not only play for himself, play for the team, which you don't always see from a teenage player.
I think it's a lot of credit goes to Forest on that side, because it's the way they're developed. And Gary Brazil, you know, he always says the non-negotiables, and that's working very hard, giving 100%, and just giving your all. And, you know, I think that sums Lincoln up in a lot of ways. You know, McGrandles, Jones, McCutt, their work ethic, their professionalism, the unsung heroes in that team, just do it without even breaking sweat. They're fantastic. They're the energy, they're the engine room in this team. And then they let the others play. And I think that Brennan knew when he was coming to the squad that he had to work as hard as everyone else. And it's became natural to him because he's a fit lad and he wants to keep doing well. And I think that is the basis of football now. You know, Lincoln, at top of the league at this minute, I can't remember a game where they've been outfought, outrun and outplayed. And that's testimony to all the players and the manager.
Well, that was my next question to you, David, was, you know, as a scout yourself, you know, you've seen so much in the game. What have you made of this Lincoln City side? I know I heard you talking at the top there, just saying how impressed you've been with Michael Appleton, but from a sort of analysis, scouting perspective, just how good are these boys?
I think they came into the league, and no one expected them to be where they are now. And I think that's a lot of credit to the players, the application they've put in. A lot of players do the basics very, very well, and then they have players in the final third like George Grant who can make things happen. They've got Brennan, they've got Harry Anderson, they've got Scully, they've got Tom Hopper, and they've got other players coming off the bench. And when you have 4 or 5 players who can all chip in with goals, and the defence, I think they've been fantastic all season. And for me, the best goalkeeper in the league. I can't remember the last time he's made a mistake. It's a great recipe of a team that's going to be up there till right to the end of the season. And I think as a scout looking forward, there's not many of those players that won't be playing in the Championship and further in the next couple of years.
Got a question coming for you, David. It says that there was a rumour back in 2005-06 that you almost signed for the Imps. Is it true, and how close was that potential move?
Honestly, that is so long ago. I can't remember. I was coming right to the end of my career at the time, and I would have probably been injured. 100% I would have been injured. And if it would have come along, I was never going to move or travel. I'd got to the stage where my children were in Nottingham, so Notts County and Lincoln would have probably been the ideal clubs for me to go to. But, it never happened, and that was probably just down to my injuries.
David, just finally then, is Brennan going to be getting on the score sheet a couple of times this afternoon?
Oh, I hope every week, and he gets himself into some good areas. Like I said, his end product will come further on in his years, but he gets himself in good areas. But at this minute, it's going to be a tough game today, and if he scores, I'll be really pleased. And hopefully it's all about Lincoln win today, and I'm hoping one of the centre-halves up and score a header, and we win 1-0 in a clean sheet.
We'll take it, won't we? David, really appreciate your time. Thanks ever so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you, David.
Thanks. Brennan Johnson's father, David Johnson, former Manchester United player as well, talking all about his contacts, his relationship with David Beckham as well. Brilliant insight that, isn't it, Gary?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially he works in the game now. I mean, I remember David playing for Nottingham Forest and Ipswich. I think he had a good spell with as well. So it's always nice to hear sort of former pros, not just Brennan's dad, just former pros talking about Lincoln and what they see in us. And then obviously to get the deeper insight into Brennan as well is a real treat.
Yeah, James Christopher says Brennan has been class for us this season. He's got a big future ahead of him. David Johnson supporting the Imps from the other side of the pond, says, I felt super proud watching Brennan get a run out versus the US national team as well. And Gary, it was interesting to hear the other David Johnson talking about, just how important international football can be, even from such a young level.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think he was telling that he mentioned senior football first. And I think, that jump from under 23 to senior football for some young players is probably bigger than jumping them from senior domestic to senior international football. So it's obviously going to be important for a young player's development. I think more so off the field than on the field, because you're having to go away, different training methods, different teammates, you're having to learn to adapt to different people and personalities. So I think that at a young age, for a player to go away and experience that, I think probably makes them a more rounded individual, makes them grow up a little bit quicker potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Another young player with the Imps is, of course, Taiyo Eden. He gave his pre-match press conference on Friday. This is what he had to say.
Taiyo, you've reached the 30-game mark for the appearance on Tuesday night. You must be happy to get that many games in this season so far.
Yeah, of course, when I joined Lincoln, that was always an aim of mine to get consecutive games under my belt, and I managed to achieve that target.
I was just speaking to the manager about trying to convince you that your left back is your position. I know we've spoke to you about it before as well. Do you start to understand now what the manager and his coaching staff were saying?
Yeah, I think at the time when he presented it to me, I was I don't know. It was a bit like I'm not sure if I can fully commit to this, but I think at the same time, also him giving the confidence in me that he knew I was able to do it. I felt like I got to trust him and just listen to the advice he has to give.
And do you feel like you're growing into that role now?
Yeah, definitely. I think I've got better as the weeks have gone on in that position, and yeah, as my fitness and things have improved over the season, I'm just pushing on. Yeah.
And how, fitness-wise, how does it compare to being that midfielder? You know, because usually midfielders a lot of the time are box-to-box as it is. Is there a different style of fitness you need to be at fullback?
I think slightly. I think it's more, I would say more sprints, having to obviously track runners so for example, your winger, and then having to run in behind the opposition a bit more. Whereas I'm used to in the midfield, probably being on the move more, but covering less distance in terms of sprints.
And how's it helped having those experienced centre-halves alongside you at times to guide you through games?
It's always good, of course. Like, you've seen how they've been performing. I think Jack and Wilshere have been excellent. Obviously, Lewis has played a big role this season as well, and I'm sure he will do over the coming months. But you can see how comfortable they are, not only defensively but also in possession. So it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, Taiyo Eden speaking there to BBC Radio Lincolnshire's Rob Makepeace. Gary, interesting to hear Taiyo talking about, playing alongside some more experienced centre-backs like Joe Walsh and Adam Jackson. But going back to what we were chatting about before with regards to Regan Poole and Cohen Bramall coming in, what will Taiyo as a young player, albeit Regan and Cohen are both young players as well, what will Taiyo take from that? You'd expect that it would only further sort of push him on, I guess.
Yeah, competition for places drives standards, doesn't it? I don't think Tayo's ever been able to get complacent at left back with Sean Rowan and Max Melbourne knocking on the door as well. So to see somebody else coming in at left back will hopefully spur him on. And I would certainly hope the young player's professionalism would allow him to see the opportunity in it. I don't think that these young players are the sorts who let their heads drop or their bottom lips come out. I don't see that at all. I also think there's opportunity for Taiyo to develop as a midfielder. I like him at left back. I've always kind of championed him at left back, even when perhaps he wasn't having a great spell. But I do see his long-term career, I think, with Lincoln in the midfield. I do see his attributes lying more as a central midfielder. So I think being versatile is a good thing and a bad thing. It's great because it does mean that you can fill in and you can get games, but it can be hard to forge an identity. And I think long-term, Taiyo will look to be forging his identity in a key position, possibly in midfield.
Comments coming in thick and fast regarding which player made you fall in love with football or made you fall in love with the Imps. Ryan Whelan says Simon Year, of course. Remember standing in the crowd shouting his name, had his name on the back of my shirt, loved him. Brennan is going to be some player. Stephen Henson says John Ward, when he first moved from Adelaide Park to Lincoln. And Gary, I didn't even get a chance to ask you which player made you fall in love with football.
You didn't ask me, Sam, because we'll be here all night. I think the first player that made me fall in love with football was a fullback, a striker turned fullback called Paul Smith, who made ginger being cool for me at 10 years old, which was a very tough thing to do. But obviously, from there, Gordon Hobson, Tony Lormer, David Putnam, Gareth Ainsworth, Peter Gain, all kind of carried the love on.
We've got pictures to bring you from the LNER Stadium. Hopefully the pictures there that you can see. A little bit of snow on the touchline, but not quite the same sort of amount of snow that we saw certainly from the KCOM Stadium the other evening. Gary, looks like those pictures are coming in from from one of the boxes behind the ground as well. Look, we didn't get a chance to play this game yesterday, but important, wasn't it, to get the job done sort of this weekend?
Yeah, it's unfortunately the silver lining to the cloud of not having supporters in, isn't it? That it allows for a lot more flexibility and allows us to be reactive. If this game had been called off yesterday and supporters were in the stadium, there is no chance whatsoever it goes ahead 27 hours later. Logistically, it's just not possible. I think it's really important from our point of view that we get games played as soon as we can. I think I looked through the fixture list and there's only one or two free Tuesdays between now and May. And obviously, depending on Wednesday's result, that will change again. So there was obviously a real desire from us to get it played. I think Accrington are 3 games behind us at the moment. So there would have been a deep desire from them to get it played as well. A fair play to the ground staff and everyone at Lincoln City for ensuring that the game's on. I'm sure plenty of work's gone into the surface and that shouldn't be undervalued.
Team news with you in around about 4 minutes. Alan Long will be live pitch side at the LNER Stadium. Gary, from the Imps' point of view, what sort of team are you expecting Michael Appleton to put out this evening?
I think there'll be a couple of changes. I can see, depending on Ioma and Eden, there may be one new fullback comes in. I did wonder if Ioma may have been struggling a little bit on Tuesday night. I think he'd been ill in the run-up, so it wouldn't surprise me to see one of those two start. Obviously, I think Liam Bridcut's missing as well, so the midfield almost certainly will be Grant McGrandles and James Jones. Outside of that, I don't expect too many changes, if I'm entirely honest. I think we've been on a good run. We've been getting good results. Michael trusts the players, but he will have one eye, obviously, on Wednesday night. Now, we know Regan Poole is cup tied for Wednesday night, so it's likely, if any change, Regan Poole comes in. I would think probably we'll see Max Sanders Wednesday night, not Riss tonight as well. So it's getting interesting with so many games coming thick and fast and so many players in such good form. You know, the team selection is always very, very interesting.
From Accrington's point of view then, Gary, I know you mentioned them around about 3 months or so, thinking that they could be dark horses in terms of sneaking into those playoff spots. And look, they've tailed off slightly, haven't they? But they're still in and amongst it. They've got games in hand as well. They could well do it, couldn't they?
Yes, they could. And I think if you look even further down, Oxford United are right up there. I think they've overtaken Plymouth, who are in 9th and 10th. So they're knocking on the door as well. Games in hand we've spoke about are all well and good, but they're not as good as points on the board. And Accrington will be aware that with a fixture pile up and a relatively small squad, I think it would be a big ask for them to finish inside the top 6. I think when you do look at the top 6, I think they're Sunderland are just obviously now making a little bit of a play there, hoping to come into form. Doncaster are tailing off a little bit as well. The next 3 or 4 weeks are going to be really interesting. And when you look at our fixtures, with the greatest of respect to the teams that we're playing, we've got what look like winnable fixtures. We've come through a tough time. Peterborough, Portsmouth, Doncaster. Obviously there's no easy games at this level, but I think a couple of our rivals have each other to play. So over the next couple of weeks, a lot will pan out. And I think in terms of Accrington, we may just see them tumble away. But I've been wrong about Accrington before, so I may well be again.
Matt Stevenson says, like the fact that Brennan's only on loan, but his dad's obviously a proper Lincoln fan right now. He's not just watching his son. Yeah, absolutely. Plenty of you getting your comments in regarding which player made you fall in love with football. Jacob says, Harry Anderson is my favourite first player. Adam Nicholson says, Scott Kerr, what a player he was. James Christian Biddle says, Gareth Ainsworth for me as well. Lynn's there saying, hi guys from Cyprus. My idols were from the 66, of course, World Cup squad. Then when I started to go to Sincil Bank with my dad in the early 70s, the great Dave Smith, then John Ward, Percy Freeman, and Gordon Hobson. Some big shouts there, aren't they, Gary?
Huge shouts. I'd love to get Gordon Hobson on the show. Absolute hero of mine. My granddad was a huge John Ward fan. He had a John Ward Lincolnshire poacher scarf as well. But, it's interesting, the Scott Kerr shout, because sometimes the player that makes you fall in love with football probably isn't the flair player or the standout player. Scott Kerr was a grafter. So it's interesting that somebody's picked him as well.
Just before we bring you the team news, Gary, I'm getting the sense from some of these comments that we've got a bunch of players at the moment that actually, if we're doing this show, we see the show in maybe 15, 20 years' time, actually people are going to be commenting saying, look, the Brennan Johnsons of this world, the Morgan Rogers made me fall in love with football. It does seem to be that kind of squad, doesn't it?
Yeah, guaranteed. You think about 82, 83 with Peake and Thompson and Cockrell and Shipley, they're players that people will cite now as making them fall in love with football. So the squad that we've got now challenging for the championship, it is inevitable that those players will make some of our younger fans fall in love with the game and remain in love with the game for the rest of their life.
Well, let's see which of those players are in today's starting 11 then. This is Michael Appleton's team news to face Accrington Stanley live with Alan Long, who's pitch side.
Hi Sam, thank you. Welcome to a chilly, blustery LNER pitchside stadium, and I've got today's team news, and the news is that there's 4 players coming into the squad. We've got Regan Poole, Lewis Montsma, James Jones and Colin Bramall all starting tonight. So here we go with the Imps lineup. Your goal number 1 is Alex Palmer, at 2 Regan Poole, at 4 Lewis Montsma, 8 James Jones, number 9 Tom Hopper, number 10 George Grant, 15 Colin Bramall, at 16 Joe Walsh, Conor McGrandles is in at 18, 20 Brennan Johnson and 27 Morgan Rogers. On the bench, number 31 Sam Long, at 5 Adam Jackson, at 6 Max Saunders making his debut, at 7 Taiyo Eden, 11 Anthony Scully, TJ Elmer is at 22 and 26 Harry Anderson. So the starting lineup again for the Imps: Alex Palmer, Regan Poole, Lewis Monsmer, James Jones, Tom Hopper, George Grant, Conor Blamon, Joe Walsh, Conor McGrandles, Brennan Johnson and Morgan Rogers. From a chilly pitch side, back to you in the warm, Sam.
Absolutely love that hat that Alan Long's wearing there as well. So that is your Lincoln City starting 11 for this afternoon. Michael Appleton making 4 changes to that side that drew with Hull on Tuesday night. Alex Palmer, it is then Regan Poole. Lewis Monsmer comes back into the side. He's alongside Joe Walsh. Cohen Bramall in there as well. The captain this afternoon is George Grant. No Liam Bridcut following an injury that he picked up in and around that game, wasn't it? It was at the start of that game against Hull on Tuesday. Conor McGrandles and James Jones in there as well. Then it is Morgan Rogers, Brennan Johnson and Tom Hopper, Long, Jackson, Sanders, Eden, Scully, Ioma and Anderson. So Gary, let's start with the defence then. Lewis Monsmer back in. He's in for Adam Jackson.
Yeah, a little bit of a surprise. I think that I thought Lewis was going to be made to wait until one of the players put foot wrong, but then obviously the game's coming thick and fast. We've got to mix it up a little bit. Might be one eye on Wednesday. You know, Charlie White's in great form, old style centre forward, all elbows and that sort of thing. Probably more suited to a Walsh and Jackson combination. So I would think some of these changes are being made with the fixture congestion in mind, not with individual players' form in mind.
Yeah, I mean, this is why some of these players essentially were signed, weren't they? And they're not only very good players, but they're coming in at the right time. You know, we look at the likes of Regan Poole, who's now playing for TJ Omer. TJ was in great form, wasn't he? And I imagine he still, will continue to be in really good form. But, you've got to play the quality of Regan Poole. It's going to be difficult not to play him in some of these games towards the end of the season.
Yeah, 100%. Regan Poole's played in the Football League Trophy as well, so he couldn't play right back on Wednesday night. So almost certainly TJ comes in. So I think there's one eye on making sure that players aren't having too many minutes. And I think in the early stages of the Hull game, particularly both Ioma and Eden, you could see that they were beginning to show not the strain in terms of their form, but like Taiyo said in his interview, those short sprints, those short bursts. Tracking it is incredibly stamina consuming, so it's nice to be able to rotate the fullbacks with similar quality. One hopes we haven't seen enough of Regan Poole and Cohen Bramall to be 100% sure on that, but almost certainly you would expect to be similar quality players, same pace, same intent, so it's good for the rest of the season certainly.
Can't help but feel, Gary, what a shame it is that Liam Bridcut's picked up another slight injury, because he was really coming into some great form, wasn't he? He was out of action for a few weeks, around about a month ago, 6 weeks. He's then come back into this side, helped us to some really big victories. It's not just his play on the pitch, it's his leadership, it's his play off it as well. Real shame that he's not involved this afternoon. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's only 2 games that we've lost in the league that he's played in. He's pivotal to what we do in the way that we play. As I said before, he links the back four and the attacking midfielders very well, and he plays more passes more often than anyone else on the field. So he's certainly going to be a huge loss. I think the other loss is you bring George Grant to sit in that holding role, and then you lose Grant's creativity a little bit further forward. So it places a huge amount of emphasis on James Jones. But remember, James Jones is a player that had regular football all the way up to picking up his injury and being out over Christmas. So he's somebody that we know that we can rely on, but it's a big game for him. We've seen these games come and go where certain key players have been out and they've been handed their chance, and in nearly every circumstance they've taken it. What's tough for James Jones is that if Liam Bridcut's fit, he's probably the only player that has a free pass back into the side, which makes it very tough for the midfielders to impress and stay put in the first team.
Jim Olsen says, big call changing both fullbacks who have been excellent, yet certainly have a good opportunity for Poole and Bramall. Ian Hodson says, bench always looks strong these days with some game changes if needed. Yeah, that's a really good point, isn't it, Gary? We mentioned it against Hull on Tuesday night, didn't we? It was probably the strongest looking Imps bench. And once again, it pretty much is this evening.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I would say is that Michael doesn't make a habit of turning to his bench en masse. He can make 5 substitutions. I think there's only been 2 or 3 occasions where he's gone over the previously permitted 3. So he's not a man to tinker a huge amount during the games. But I think now, again, we keep talking about it with these games coming thick and fast, he's going to need that bench. You're going to need to be reactive. If a certain key player starts feeling, a tightness somewhere or a little bit of bruising somewhere, you're going to want to protect that player. 3 or 4 weeks ago, or certainly before the transfer window, we didn't have quite as many options. We were going into games with 5 on the bench, and often maybe a youngster on the bench who isn't going to come on unless it's absolute necessity. So it's great that we are now seeing a real depth to the bench. And bear in mind, Callum Morton back with the squad as well. He will almost certainly make the bench on a regular basis when he's back, because arguably the only position that we don't have a direct like-for-like alternative is Tom Hopper's number 9 position.
Great stuff, Gary. More from Gary Hutchinson later on in today's Matchday Live. We'll be catching up with the Chief Executive, Liam Scully, in around about 5-10 minutes' time as well. Let's get the pre-match thoughts from the manager, Michael Appleton.
No, not really. I mean, if you look at a couple of the games that we played, I get what John's saying there, and I'm glad that's sort of his thoughts and attitude going into the game, because that will suit us. I think what all I would say is there's been quite a few teams who scored first, and then for 60, 70 minutes we're having to break a block of 11 players behind the ball, 30 yards from our goal, and actually one of them was Doncaster. So it's okay saying it and applying it and doing it are 2 different things, and being brave enough to do it if you go ahead in the game as well. So listen, to be fair, John and Accrington have had a good season, and they were probably the better side on midweek against Plymouth. Having watched the game back, and probably should have won the game, but they've got a lot of quality in them forward areas. They've got the option now of playing with a 4 or a 3, so we'll wait to see which one they decide on. But we're in a pretty good place. I know we've lost Liam, but we'll be ready for the game.
One player they have added since your last meeting, Adam Phillips, obviously, who's had a great season, or first half of the season at Morecambe. Just how quality a player is he?
Yeah, no, he's a talent, and to be fair, it's one of them where they do quite well. Certainly picking up players from like either a low division or the conference, and integrating into their group, because they've got a tight knit group, and that you can tell there's a real togetherness, a team spirit, and they're almost us against the world type of attitude, and that makes them dangerous.
You've got a lot of games coming up over the next few weeks again, including the trophy. We're going to see the whole squad be used over the next fortnight.
I think it's only inevitable, really. I think it's only inevitable. I think we've got a lot of players who deserve an opportunity at some point to play, and there'll be lots of rotation, and it won't be one to try and be clever and try to outsmart people and all these things. Yes, we think they might be helpers in certain games with certain players, but the reality is if we don't do it, we'll pick up a load of injuries, and that is the bottom line. If we don't rotate and don't give people opportunities and change the team, we'll end up with 5 or 6 serious injuries.
We're going to speak to Taiyo Eden next. I remember probably a month or 2 ago when we spoke about him, you were saying about the conversation you and your coaching staff had about how you felt he was a left back, not a central midfielder, as his predominant position. Are we seeing that now that's coming to fruition with his performances in the last month?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, what it was is he spent most of his career as a midfield player, but we just felt that some of the attributes that he's got, because we knew he'd played there before, would certainly allow him to really kick on as a fullback. And there were certain things that he had to learn and get better at to be able for us to stand behind them comments. But I think over the last month, like you say, his performances have stood the test of time, and he's been really good, and he's been consistent, and he looks like he's enjoying his football.
Yeah, Michael Appleton giving his pre-match thoughts to BBC Radio Lincolnshire's Rob Makepeace there. Delighted to say that the Chief Executive Officer, Liam Scully, joins us now. Liam, great to see you. I imagine it's a big relief to get the game on this evening. How touch and go was it?
Yeah, definitely a big relief to get the game on. Really pleased the fact that we've been able to work with our friends at Accrington, Stanley, and work with the league and everybody involved, and fundamentally get a game on with the fixture congestion that we already have. It's definitely pleasing to try and resolve this as quick as we possibly could.
Yeah, I mean, it says a lot, I guess, about the quality of the facilities at the moment that we've been able to get it on so quickly, because there were freezing temperatures again last night. A lot of clubs that postponed their games yesterday haven't been able to sort of cram it in this weekend. So, good within that regard, I guess.
Yeah, definitely so. Credit to the grounds team and everybody in and around the football club. They've worked miracles in the last 24 hours. From the outside looking in, I'm sure just changing the date and the start time, whilst I respect it's an inconvenience to many, they probably, or with respect, it's probably not easy to explain how much work's had to go on in the background to kind of keep this on. And I suppose just to quickly touch on why we opted to do this, it's definitely function over form. We very much respect the fans' views in this, but if we look at the rest of the season as it stands at the moment, we've got 3 free midweek slots, 6th of April, 13th of April, and the 4th of May, which leads up to right to the very last week. Definitely not getting ahead of ourselves, but it's our jobs to consider all permutations. First of all, we've got an international break, 22nd to the 30th of March. It's likely with the constitution of our squad and that of Oxford's that one of us is going to have international call-ups to think about. So we could already be losing a date then. And of course, again, not getting too far ahead of ourselves, but with the potential of the EFL Trophy weekend and potential having to lose the Rochdale fixture, you can quite quickly see that the fixture backlog is going to stack up. So yeah, with everything considered, the I suppose advantage, for the want of a much better term, of not having travelling fans in the stadium, we were able to come up with something quick and a little bit out of the box thinking, but thankfully we've got the game on.
Yeah, Liam, you touched very briefly there on EFL Trophy, if I may just interject. Obviously, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. But how important from both a financial and a profile point of view to the club is Wednesday's game?
Oh, huge in a couple of ways. So first of all, we've made around £140,000 from the trophy so far, just over £120,000 in prize money, and then a further 20,000 in kind of streaming shares. Now, actually, the disappointing thing is in a more regular season, we'd probably be looking at another 6 figures on top of that. The prize fund are very active. Equally, we do have. On what we are considering is that ongoing profile. We're very proud that the Lincoln versus Peterborough game. We understand nearly 400,000 people watched that. Live on Sky at the time that it was broadcast. And to put that into comparison, normally League One fixtures have around 150 to 200,000 people viewing them. So again, keeping our profile. In the national front, obviously people aware of it, and making sure that we're streaming and broadcasting abroad all helps, certainly in terms of the finance raising, attracting new investors, and equally, obviously, we're really proud to fly the flag for Lincoln on a national and even international scale.
Yes, certainly so. 400,000. That's quite a number. Watching the Imps a few weeks ago, definitely. Liam, tell us about this raffle then. It's all to do with season tickets and credit options. It's the biggest raffle in the club's history. For those of you who've not seen it, details are on www.weareimps.com. Liam, tell us about some of the prizes that are on offer and how this came about.
Yeah, look, I think first and foremost, we're incredibly grateful for the support of the fans that we've had right throughout this. But if we look at next season, we know we nearly owe the fans around £500,000 worth in credit and various other elements for their loyalty and supporting us this season. Now, obviously, the cash in the bank and cash flow that certainly helped us. A lot of fans have been in touch with me, myself personally, Clive, or the team, and have kind of been saying, look, we're really keen to kind of help further. And I think from our point of view, it's a really delicate balance, because the last thing we want to ever come across as doing is taking the fan support for granted, which we don't, and we're very appreciative of their support. And equally, what we wanted to do is, rather than just maybe even ask fans or expect them to convert to shares or whatever it may be again, try and offer some genuine prizes, some things that people might feel they would like. So yeah, the biggest raffle, some hopefully some great prizes there for people, from a hospitality box for a season to having a squad number. So the whole idea was to kind of give the fans the opportunity to win or get something really special in return for their continued support and commitment. I think, just to be really, really clear, there's no expectation. It's not a competition. Ultimately, it's our job to manage whatever credit that the fans have at the start of next season. We owe you guys that. But of course, any support people can provide us, we will of course be very, very grateful for.
Yeah, as well as that hospitality box that you mentioned there, Liam, I'm noticing a 5-year general admission season ticket, a squad signed match ball from the 2020-21 season as well, and an opportunity to be chairman for the day at a home fixture. There's 3 of those available. I've noticed there's an opportunity to be a chairman, but not a chief executive, Liam.
Well, yeah, that's because the chairman gets to shout at the chief executive. So I think it'd be unfair if it was the other way around. So yeah, let's see. But yeah, be nice to have a different boss for a day or two. So let's see what happens there.
Just a word on this season then, Liam. How proud are you, to be running this operation, to see the club doing so well from a league table perspective once again?
Yeah, look, incredibly proud. First of all, it's got very, very little to do with me. We're very, very lucky to have such wonderful colleagues, a great board that support us, and of course the great work that goes on at the EPC from Michael and his team. Let's be honest. We never expected to be in this position when the season started. That we are incredibly proud, and I think the support of the fans, the goodwill of the fans, and everything that's ultimately been part of this story. Ever since I've been at the football club, it's just fantastic for us to kind of maintain that momentum and keep giving the fans something to be proud of and cheer on. We're desperately missing fans from the stadium. Every single match day, you come in here now and it just doesn't feel right and never will feel right. So we're very much looking forward to getting fans back in the stadium in some way, shape or form. But hopefully, whilst it is difficult times across, the country and internationally, hopefully we're giving people just something to smile about.
Now, fans on Twitter, Liam, will have noticed that there was a big debate taking place on Friday night. You started it, and it was to do with Burton Road Chippy or chippies in general, wasn't it? Scraps or scrumps? That's the big question. You've been quite passionate about this.
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't really mean to start such a big debate. But yeah, absolutely. I'm not having scrumps or whatever it's called. It's scraps, and that's the end of the matter. So you can come at me with whatever you want, but I'm not playing unless it's scraps.
There you go. Liam, great to see you. And fingers crossed for 3 points this afternoon.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Liam.
Gary, really interesting hearing Liam talk about that. I mean, the amount of dates that you have to take into account when making these decisions. You asked a really good question regarding the EFL trophy. That was just one of the reasons as to why today's game is taking place when it does. Forgetting potential other postponements, forgetting other games being called off around the leagues for whatever reason. There's so much to take into account, not just for the Imps, but for clubs across the country here.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, Liam there was talking about 3 free Tuesdays between now and the end of the season. Accrington are 3 games behind us, bear in mind. So that arguably leaves them with no free Tuesdays. So you see the kind of problems that teams are coming up against. And it's a unique situation. We kicked off 3 weeks later than usual. Obviously, we've had a great cup run as well. There's teams have lost games through COVID, which I think hit Accrington early on in the season. So I think it's great to hear that the club's reactive. I think it's also good to hear that clubs are willing to work with us as well. It was a big ask on Accrington. I mean, assuming that they didn't have an overnight stay, they've got to travel back to Accrington, they've got to come back again today as well. So, but it's a unique situation, and we are where we are. We're where we are in the league. We've had a great cup run, so we're almost victims of our own success as well. If we'd gone out of the EFL trophy early, we would have had plenty of Tuesdays free. But I'd much rather be in the position that we're in now and have the club having to work hard just to find out when we can actually get games in.
If you're just joining us, Michael Appleton has made 4 changes to the side that drew 0-0 with Hull on Tuesday night. This is his starting 11. Alex Palmer in goal. Regan Poole, Lewis Monsma and Cohen Bramall all come into the side. They're alongside Joe Walsh. George Grant is the captain today because of no Liam Bridcut. Conor McGrandles and James Jones are alongside him. The front 3 of Morgan Rogers, Brennan Johnson and Tom Hopper. Substitute bench looks strong once again. Long, Jackson, Sanders is in there. Taiyo Eden, Anthony Scully, TJ Omer and Harry Anderson as well. I think we can bring you pictures from the LNER Stadium as well. Game obviously still set to take place. There's been no problems there whatsoever. This is pictures from the LNER probably around about half an hour or so ago. It's probably a little bit darker now. It's difficult, isn't it, Gary? Every time we see the LNER Stadium, it's a reminder that A, we're not there, and B, we wish we were there. But it's great to see it. And what a season we've been able to enjoy, at least from iFollow, which is something that we wouldn't have been able to do 5 or 6 years ago if a world pandemic had taken place then.
Yeah, it's strange seeing the stadium, and it doesn't get any easier at all. And for me, it's the sign, the Stacey West, because that's always kind of iconic. Wherever I've sat in the stadium over the last few years, you always look away to your left. There it is, the cathedral over the top, and it doesn't get easier. And I think something that's often struck me is, I wonder what songs some of the players would have had. And it may seem silly, but we always, the fans on the 617 always develop songs for certain players, and some players might not get that opportunity at all, which is extremely sad. But it is a great season, and look, we've got to enjoy it how we can, because it won't happen like this very often. We know that we're on the crest of a wave. Not in my time supporting Lincoln have we ever challenged or knocked on the door to the Championship at all. So we have been given remarkable insight. Hopefully, we've managed to do it a little bit on Matchday Live. But certainly, I've watched every minute of the league campaign. I follow allowing, of course. So it's strange, because at times we've felt more connected, but I've also never felt less connected. But again, I would rather have that level of success and have to make do than not have any level of success at all.
Yeah, really, really good points there, Gary. Plenty of talk, hasn't there, been about the EFL Trophy on today's Matchday Live. Of course, the Imps had a brilliant result against Accrington earlier on in the season. Hopefully something similar this afternoon. This is what happened a few months ago. Yeah, another belting tune there by the Rills as well. Some performance that from Lincoln City, wasn't it? Hopefully something similar this afternoon or this evening. This is the Accrington Stanley side to play at the LNER this afternoon. Baxter, Nottingham, Hughes, Burgess, Butcher, Smith, Barclay, Bishop, Connolly's the captain, Charles and Phillips. Gary, noticing that there's no Pritchard in the starting 11 or in the squad. He's a player that you really rate, isn't he? He could be a big miss for them this afternoon.
Yeah, he could be. I didn't hear Colby Bishop's name there either, which is interesting. He was a kind of a target man centre forward. I know Dion Charles is in.
Colby Bishop's in the side, but no Pritchard.
Yeah, Pritchard, I think he's the boy that's on loan, if I remember correctly. He's a really good player. Look, it's not going to be the same game as the EFL Trophy. They were very, very generous. And even though it's Valentine's Day, they're not going to show us the same amount of love again. It's going to be tight. And they're rolling the big guns out, and they're just outside the playoffs for a reason. They're still 2 games behind us. Arguably, as you pointed out, Sam, earlier, if they were on the same level of games, they would probably be top 6. Because it's Accrington Stanley, people tend to not give it the same gravity as a game against Doncaster or Ipswich or Sunderland, but it absolutely is. This is an opportunity for us to stake our claim at the top of the table, given yesterday's results. It's a chance for Accrington to make a really, really big point. And if they were to get a win, I think it'd be their first here since 1947. So strong team. They're coming here to take something. They're not going to come here for a draw. They're going to come here and try and win the game. They play football a nice way, and I think it'll be a good spectacle for people.
Yeah, Ian's made a really good point. He says, let's not forget just how good Monsma has been this season. Last time I said low balls in, perhaps some corners for him to attack now with his head. Of course, we've missed essentially his goal scoring capabilities in one sense, haven't we, Gary? And I imagine a lot of punters out there have missed it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think in terms of corners, don't think we've always been as dangerous. Certainly without Monsma in the side, we've never really created anything majorly dangerous from corners, and in some games we've had quite a few to attack. So with George Grant on the pitch delivering, and obviously Lewis there lurking at the back stick, I think we saw him against Blackpool score from a corner against Crewe. It would be nice to see us make more use of those, I think, because it's the one area of our play of everything that we do that I look at and just think, we could probably be better from there.
So interesting, isn't it? I mean, I heard you put out a tweet the other day, Gary, saying, look, there's thinking about player of the season so far, and there's probably 8, 9, maybe even 10 options here, which is pretty unprecedented, really, isn't it? There are a few shouts for George Grant, a few shouts in terms of the early part of the season for Lewis Monsma as well. Really difficult if you had to pick a standout player so far this season to nail one down.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the first 3 months, Harry Anderson, George Grant, Lewis Monsma leapt out of the page. I mean, they were incredibly exciting. I think over the last few months, Taiyo Eden, TJ Ioma, I mean, obviously George Grant again, have been very, very good. I think Tom Hopper overall, some people were shouting him, very underrated player in terms of his application and his work rate. Very hard to judge a player of his nature on goals alone. So, we are blessed with a great squad. Doesn't happen by accident either. Those players haven't just arrived and all of a sudden they're good players. We've brought in the right players. We've worked very well with them. And I think when you look at the likes of Taiyo Eden, there's a classic example of a player who is excelling and catching the eye after a difficult start. He didn't play a league game, I don't think, until mid-October time. He had to fight. And then you get to January, middle of February, and there's people saying, well, he could be our player of the year. It just shows what a great squad we've got and what great work goes in on the training ground with them as well.
Let's have a look at the next 5 fixtures coming up for Lincoln City then, Gary. Sunderland away, of course, in the AFL Trophy, February the 17th, Wednesday night, 6 o'clock kickoff. Wigan Athletic away, Swindon home, Plymouth away, which is going to be a really difficult game because Plymouth is certainly playing some excellent football under Ryan Lowe at the moment, and then Fleetwood at home. But overall, Gary, in terms of those league fixtures, we can come back to Sunderland in a sec, but in terms of those league fixtures, there's an opportunity there. I don't want to speak too soon, but there's an opportunity there for some points, aren't there?
There are. I think that the benchmark tends to be 2 points a game. If you take 2 points a game, you probably finish in the automatic promotion spots. So you're looking at those games and saying, have other 2 points per game? Well, there's 3 points, arguably, Wigan. Very, very strong, underrated side at times. Don't know how they've got on against Oxford this afternoon. That's going on now. But winnable. Swindon at home, they are in disarray. My postman, funnily enough, is a Swindon fan, and he just shakes his head whenever he sees me because they are poor. That's a game that we need to take 3 points from. So then you've taken potentially 6 from 2. You can go to Plymouth and go, whatever, we'll see how we do. It's a really, really tough journey down there, and they are a very good side. They're a side that caught my eye. Luke Jeffcott is their striker, the young lad who's come through, and he's on fire. Even if you then lose that, you could still potentially go into the next game, win, and you've got your 2 points per game. Get a draw at Plymouth, draw against Fleetwood would be sufficient. We should be beating Fleetwood as well. And I think, I say this all the time, this is a crucial little block. We've spoke about how I take games as a block of games. Take that block of 4 games. When you look at who some of our rivals are playing, you look at the games in hand. If we come out of that spell, let's say with 8 points or 9 points, we're then going to be in a really good position to attack the last 2 months of the season and earn ourselves a place in the Championship.
Yeah, a few comments coming in, and I've just seen that Wigan Oxford is 0-0 at the moment, but there's been reports, or certainly coming out from the Oxford United Twitter account, saying that there's a fire in the floodlights, so the second half is to be delayed. So it's going to be 0-0 at half time. Important to say as well that everyone is safely outside the building. This is according to the official Oxford United Twitter account. The fire brigade are here and discussions are still ongoing, so please do bear with us. So it's 0-0 at half time. There's been a fire and the floodlights at the Kassam Stadium, but everyone is safe. They're hoping to get the game back on, but of course, whenever anything happens like that in football, the game and the importance of the game falls into pretty much insignificance, doesn't it? So hopefully everything all right at the Kassam Stadium, but in terms of the football scoreline, that's 0-0 at the moment. Gary, got about a couple of minutes left on the show. In terms of today's game, I said it on Tuesday, you're having a stormer in terms of your score predictions. You got it right again, 0-0, you said. There's a lot of Lincoln City fans hanging on your every word at the moment, so don't let them down.
Yeah, you see, it puts pressure on, because if I don't think it's going to be a favourable result, I don't want to say it and take the blame. I actually think tonight's going to be a difficult game, and I envisage another stalemate, but I'll go for 1-0 to Lincoln.
There you go. Gary Hutchinson having an absolute stormer in terms of his score predictions so far this season. Of course, with him predicting a win, let's hope he's right. Really appreciated your company on this afternoon's Matchday Live. We've spoken to Brennan Johnson's father, haven't we? David Johnson, who gave some brilliant insight into just how well his son is doing at the Imps so far this season. And great to hear the thoughts, of course, as ever, of the CEO, Liam Scully, as well. Scraps, not scrumps. That's the key message from all of this as well. Thanks ever so much for joining us. Do enjoy the game. Fingers crossed the Imps can go 6 points clear at the top of the League One table. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.